The shocking truth about Orthodox and Catholic faiths. Christianity is the largest religion in the world, with over 2 billion followers, yet many people don't realize that for nearly 1,000 years, it has been divided into two major branches. The split between the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church wasn't just a minor theological disagreement. It was a profound rupture that shaped the course of Christian history, influencing religious traditions, politics, and even global conflicts. But what really caused this division? Why have these two ancient churches remained separate for so long, despite sharing so many foundational beliefs? Was it purely about doctrine, or were there deeper cultural and political factors at play? Stick with us as we uncover the shocking truth behind this centuries-old split. And as you watch, ask yourself, are these two faiths truly that different, or is reunification possible in the modern world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. 1. The power struggle. Who's in charge? At the heart of the division between the Catholic and Orthodox churches lies a fundamental question of authority. Who has the ultimate say in interpreting Christian doctrine? In the West, the Pope of Rome claimed supreme authority over all Christians, seeing himself as the successor of St. Peter, to whom Jesus entrusted the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Over time, this idea of papal supremacy became a cornerstone of Catholic belief, with the Pope acting as the final arbiter of theological disputes and church governance. Meanwhile, the Eastern Church viewed authority quite differently. Rather than recognizing a single supreme leader, the Orthodox tradition emphasized a model of shared leadership among bishops, with particular respect given to the Patriarch of Constantinople. They argued that no single bishop, including the Pope, should have absolute power over the entire Church. Instead, they believed in decision-making through ecumenical councils, reflecting a more decentralized approach to church governance. This disagreement over authority wasn't just a theological issue, it had serious political implications. The Pope, often aligned with Western rulers, sought to extend his influence beyond religious matters, sometimes clashing with the Byzantine emperors who saw themselves as both political and spiritual leaders of the Eastern Christian world. Over time, these competing claims to power deepened mistrust between the two sides, setting the stage for the eventual schism. The question of who truly leads the Church was never fully resolved, and to this day, it remains one of the most significant differences between Catholicism and Orthodoxy. 2. The Filioque controversy. A single word that changed everything. One of the most contentious theological disputes between the Catholic and Orthodox churches centers around a single word, filioque. This Latin term, meaning "and the Son," was added to the Nicene Creed in the Western Church, stating that the Holy Spirit proceeds from both the Father and the Son, rather than from the Father alone, as the original creed affirmed. While this may seem like a minor alteration, it had profound theological and political consequences that deepened the divide between East and West. To the Catholic Church, the Filioque clause reinforced the idea that the Son, like the Father, plays a role in the procession of the Holy Spirit. Catholic theologians argue that this doctrine aligns with biblical teachings and reflects the unity and co-equality of the Trinity. The Western Church added this phrase unilaterally, without consulting the Eastern Church, which saw this as an overreach of papal authority and a violation of the agreed-upon creed established by the early ecumenical councils. The Orthodox Church strongly opposed this addition, insisting that the Holy Spirit proceeds only from the Father, as stated in the original version of the creed. They viewed the unilateral change as not only theologically incorrect, but also as an unacceptable alteration to the foundational beliefs of Christianity. The controversy over the Filioque became a symbol of the broader tensions between the two churches, touching on issues of authority, doctrine, and tradition. For the Orthodox, this was another example of the Western Church asserting dominance without the consensus of the broader Christian community. Over time, this seemingly small doctrinal dispute evolved into a major rift, contributing to the mutual excommunications of 1054 and the formal split of Christianity. Even today, the Filioque remains a point of contention in Catholic Orthodox dialogue, serving as a reminder of how deep theological differences can shape history and religious identity. 3. Cultural and political divisions. The East versus the West. Beyond theological disputes, the Great Schism was also fueled by deep-seated cultural and political differences between the Eastern and Western Roman empires. The West, centered in Rome, developed under the influence of Latin traditions, Roman law, and the authority of the Pope, emphasizing a structured, hierarchical church. Meanwhile, the East, centered in Constantinople, retained strong ties to Greek philosophy, Byzantine governance, and a more decentralized ecclesiastical system that relied on councils rather than a single supreme leader. Language played a crucial role in deepening the divide. Latin was the liturgical and scholarly language of the West, while the East primarily used Greek. This language barrier led to misunderstandings in theological debates, differences in biblical interpretations, and even mistranslations of key doctrines. Over time, these differences contributed to a growing sense of otherness between the two halves of Christendom. Politically, the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD left the Pope as the dominant authority in Western Europe, filling the power vacuum left by the collapse of imperial rule. In contrast, the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire continued to thrive, with the emperor playing a significant role in religious matters, often acting as a mediator in theological disputes. This dynamic led to tension over whether spiritual authority should rest solely with the Pope or be shared among multiple leaders. Cultural attitudes also diverged. The West, frequently besieged by invading tribes and political instability, developed a more rigid church structure to maintain order. The East, enjoying relative stability, fostered a more philosophical and mystical approach to theology, emphasizing spiritual contemplation and the traditions of the early church fathers. These long-standing cultural and political differences laid the groundwork for the eventual split in 1054, making reconciliation even more difficult, as both sides grew increasingly entrenched in their distinct identities. 4. The final blow. The Great Schism of 1054. By the time 1054 arrived, tensions between the Eastern and Western churches had been simmering for centuries. Disputes over theology, church authority, and political alliances had driven a wedge between them, but it was a dramatic confrontation between two powerful figures that pushed the divide into an official schism. On one side was Pope Leo IX, who insisted on papal supremacy and the authority of Rome over all Christendom. On the other was Patriarch Michael Cerularius of Constantinople, who rejected Rome's claims and sought to assert Eastern independence. The final breaking point came when Cardinal Humbert, a representative of the Pope, entered the Hagia Sophia, the Grand Cathedral of Constantinople, and placed a bull of excommunication on the altar, formally declaring the Orthodox Church to be in heresy. In retaliation, Patriarch Cerularius excommunicated the Pope's representatives, solidifying the schism. While the dramatic exchange in 1054 was symbolic, the true division had already taken root in the hearts and minds of Christians across the empire. This split wasn't just a disagreement between church leaders, it permanently altered the course of Christianity. From this moment on, the two churches developed separately. The Catholic Church in the West continued to centralize power under the Pope, while the Orthodox Church in the East maintained its decentralized council-based structure. Over time, their differences only deepened, shaping theology, liturgy, and even the cultural identity of their followers. The Great Schism was more than just a religious dispute. It was the moment when Christianity itself fractured, setting the stage for conflicts, crusades, and centuries of mistrust. Even now, over 1,000 years later, the scars of this division remain. Can this historic wound ever be healed, or is the divide between Catholicism and Orthodoxy too deep to bridge? 5. The Fourth Crusade, a betrayal that sealed the divide. If the Great Schism of 1054 created a theological and political chasm between the Catholic and Orthodox churches, the Fourth Crusade, 1202-1204, was the moment that ensured reconciliation would be nearly impossible. Originally intended as a holy war to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control, the crusade took a shocking and disastrous turn, one that left the Eastern Orthodox world in shock and resentment for centuries to come. Pope Innocent III called for the crusade with the goal of retaking the Holy Land, but financial difficulties and political maneuvering diverted the Crusaders' attention. Instead of heading directly to Jerusalem, they became entangled in the complex politics of the Byzantine Empire. The deposed Byzantine prince Alexios IV promised the Crusaders vast sums of money and military support if they helped him reclaim his throne in Constantinople. Desperate for funds, the Crusaders agreed. What followed was one of the most infamous betrayals in Christian history. In 1204, when political turmoil in Byzantium prevented Alexios IV from delivering on his promises, the frustrated Crusaders turned on the city. They launched a brutal siege of Constantinople, breaching its legendary walls and unleashing a horrifying sack. The Crusaders, fellow Christians, pillaged churches, desecrated sacred relics, and slaughtered civilians. The famed Hagia Sophia, the spiritual heart of Eastern Christianity, was looted and defiled, with drunken crusaders even placing a prostitute on the patriarch's throne as an act of mockery. Countless treasures of Byzantine art and culture were stolen and taken to the West, some of which remain in Catholic churches and museums today. The effects of this catastrophe were irreversible. The Byzantine Empire was shattered, and the Latin Empire, a Western-controlled puppet state, was established in Constantinople. The Orthodox world saw this as the ultimate betrayal. Not only had their Catholic counterparts refused to aid them against Muslim invasions in the past, but now they had turned their swords against fellow Christians. The deep wounds inflicted by this act of violence solidified Orthodox distrust of the Catholic Church and became one of the greatest obstacles to reunification. Even though the Latin Empire collapsed in 1261 and the Byzantines reclaimed Constantinople, the damage had already been done. The Orthodox Church would never forget the horrors of 1204, and to this day, many Eastern Christians see the Fourth Crusade as the defining moment that permanently cemented the divide between the two churches. This was no longer just a theological dispute. This was a betrayal written in blood, fire, and the ashes of a once great Christian capital. 6. Doctrinal differences. More than just tradition. While political and historical events played a significant role in the division between Catholicism and Orthodoxy, theological differences remain at the heart of the separation. These differences extend far beyond ceremonial traditions or minor variations in practice. They shape the very essence of how each church understands God, salvation, and the nature of the church itself. One of the most significant doctrinal differences is the concept of original sin. The Catholic Church teaches that all humans inherit both the guilt and the consequences of Adam and Eve's sin, requiring baptism to cleanse them from this inherent stain. In contrast, The Orthodox Church believes that while humanity inherits the consequences of Adam's fall, such as suffering and death, it does not inherit personal guilt. This difference influences the way both churches approach sin, salvation, and the necessity of sacraments. Another major divergence is the Catholic doctrine of purgatory. Catholics believe in an intermediate state where souls undergo purification before entering heaven. Orthodox Christians, however, reject the idea of purgatorial suffering, instead emphasizing prayers for the dead and God's mercy in the afterlife. This theological gap reflects deeper contrasts in the two churches' views on divine justice, grace, and redemption. The issue of the Immaculate Conception also marks a fundamental difference. The Catholic Church teaches that Mary, the mother of Jesus, was conceived without original sin to ensure her purity. The Orthodox Church, while deeply revering Mary as Theotokos, God-bearer, does not accept this doctrine, arguing that she, like all humans, was born subject to the fallen condition of the world, yet remained sinless through her personal holiness and obedience to God. Sacraments, known as mysteries in the Orthodox tradition, also vary between the two churches. While both recognize baptism, the Eucharist, and other essential sacraments, their theological interpretations and liturgical practices differ. For example, the Catholic Church uses unleavened bread for the Eucharist, symbolizing the Passover meal, while the Orthodox Church insists on leavened bread, emphasizing the risen Christ. The Catholic Church allows for the development of doctrine through councils and papal declarations, whereas the Orthodox Church adheres strictly to the teachings of the early Church Fathers and ecumenical councils, resisting doctrinal innovation. These doctrinal differences are not simply academic debates. They have shaped centuries of Christian practice, belief, and identity. While both traditions share a common foundation in the early Church, their distinct theological developments have solidified their separate paths. As a result, the gap between Catholicism and Orthodoxy remains more than just historical. It is a fundamental divide in how each side understands the very nature of God and His Church. Where do we go from here? The division between the Catholic and Orthodox churches has stood for nearly 1,000 years, shaped by theological disputes, political struggles, and cultural differences. While there have been efforts at reconciliation, these two traditions continue to maintain their distinct identities. Understanding their history and differences is key to fostering respectful dialogue and learning from the past. What do you think? Is unity between these two ancient branches of Christianity possible? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history and theology, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.